Matt, I appreciate you being on the show, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's about time our paths have crossed.
I mean, just in the last 20 minutes, we have a half dozen mutual friends, and then Josh, who lives up in Vermont now, he was like, oh yeah, he was my roommate. I'm like, how have we never crossed paths? But here we are.
Yeah, and our biggest, deepest connection is to the state of Vermont. And I feel like, I watched a lot of your interviews, a lot of your content, and I think it's just important for people to know about that great state.
I'm okay if people don't know about it.
Because it's like the hidden gem.
I mean, during COVID, everyone from Boston and New York City moved up and basically priced out half the locals, and so it was unfortunate because everyone now they can work from home, so now everyone wants a bit of land, and so it's the housing market just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit unfortunate, but I'm biased. I grew up there. We moved down in Tennessee, and I always thought I don't care where I live. And then it was our first trip. I think it was Thanksgiving or something. Went back and I was like, I love it here.
Yeah.
And then I think it was that trip we bought a piece of land, and then a couple years later found a nice house that we like. So it's home.
It's amazing, and I have I have a connection to it because I went to school at University of Vermont. What year did you graduate?
So I think technically I graduated in December of 2015.
Okay.
But then I don't think I walked until May of 2016.
Okay.
And I actually didn't want to go because I think I had regionals the next weekend. So I was like, I'm not going to go to graduation. I'm going to miss a couple hours of training. And then my parents were like, oh no, you're walking.
Okay. So I graduated class of 2013.
Okay.
So I think though we were definitely on campus at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is wild to think about.
I would have started at UVM either late 2012 or early 2013.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was at NMU till I was 22, I think. So yeah, it would have been 2012. So yeah, I would have started at UVM 2013.
That's wild, man.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Small world.
And I was a lax bro, so there's no way our paths would have crossed. But
I was an engineering nerd. Dude.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I lived off campus. I lived at home because I was I grew up, 5-10 minutes down the road from UVM. So it was why would I, pay for room and board when I lived 10 minutes down the road? And, I was 23 when I was there. So, I was a good chunk older than everyone there. So I didn't really relate with too many kids. So I literally went to campus, went to class, and then just went home, or I would just sit in the library all weekend. So I did not have much of a social life in college.
Yeah, so I do want to get back into kind of the stress that you put yourself in when you would compete.
Yeah.
And you do talk a lot about it. And I imagine the same kind of stress you put it on yourself in your education, right?
It was identical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so let's talk about that. I have some stuff written out here, but when I watched you in a lot of different interviews, you talk a lot about your anxiety and leaving no stone unturned.
Yeah.
Did you feel, and as crazy as it sounds, did you feel as though that anxiousness provided you with a competitive advantage?
Oh, 100%. I was very open. The people that were with me day to day knew what I was going through. They knew what was in my head. So O'Keefe and Sammy. I think most people observing, if they were in the gym with me, they saw, just the anxiety or the fear, whatever it was, because we don't know what we're going to do in competition. There's no rules or regulations of what's allowed and not allowed. So you have to be proficient at anything you can think of. And I hated that feeling, but I intentionally kept it. I never wanted that feeling of fear to go away because I know fear is an incredible motivator. And it's kind of like when you're a kid and you're playing tag, when do you feel like you're running the fastest? When you feel somebody's chasing you and they're right on your tail, that's when you're moving the fastest. And so that's how I looked at my training of people are chasing me and I want to make sure I outrun them. Yeah, and it was just, I found it to be a great motivator, and it wasn't.
But it's taxing though.
Yes,
like it hurts.
incredibly, yeah. But that was all I knew at the time, and I was like, this works. I like the results, and so I'm just going to keep it, because I knew there was a timestamp on it. So like, if I knew that was going to be my life forever, no way, it's not sustainable. But because I knew, like, I only have a handful of years at this. I'm not young. I'm not low mileage. Like, yeah, I started CrossFit when I was 23. Yeah, 23. I had done 10 years of competitive Olympic weightlifting prior to that. So it's like, I already had a full sports career and then retired from that. And I was like, oh, finally I can relax. And then I found this thing called CrossFit, and I was like, all right, let's run it back. Let's do another 10 years.
So how old are you?
I'll be 33 next week.
It's okay.
I'll be 33 next week.
Okay, cool. I mean, we're similar age. There are people our age still competing. And
oh yeah.
So I think though, I like your point that because you knew there was a cap.
Yeah.
You were okay with suffering, but not just suffering like in the way of suffering, like I'm gonna make my lungs bleed and the mental suffering. You were okay with it because you knew.
Yeah, there was both. It was the mental and the physical.
Well, true. But a physical could not be as tough as the mental, because I feel like the mental doesn't leave you when the workout's over.
True. Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But do you ever think about the career athletes like Tom Brady, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, who just kept going, and you're like, how the fuck do you do that? Because I had a cap.
Oh no, I know exactly how they do it. If I had a contract signed for $25 million a year, you bet your ass I'd be on that floor right now. But for where I was at with life, like my life was on hold. Like our season is so long. It's not like we have an eight games, one per weekend type thing. It's like it spans a majority of the year. And when I was doing it, it's like I put my life on hold, but it's not just me that's sacrificing. It's also Sammy. It's also O'Keefe, my family, my extended family. Like I'm not able to travel to go see them. I'm not able to be as involved as I want to be. And that's just family, never mind friends, like the most obvious story. I think it was the first time I had to make that decision was my buddy's bachelor party. It was a couple weeks before regionals or games or some big competition that mattered. And it was just like they rented a beach house and they had a bash, just a good time. And I had to tell my best friend, like, sorry, man, I can't go. Like, I have a competition. And thankfully, I'm surrounded by people that are supportive, understand what I'm doing, understand the reasoning behind it. And so it wasn't a problem. He was like, yep, go handle your business. But for me, hopefully he only ever has one bachelor party, and I had to miss it. So it was stuff like that just kind of added up. And at a certain point I was like, I was just so ready for other things. Because I have felt for a long time that like I'm meant for more than just this one thing, And so it's as soon as I retired, I had game plans in place of like projects I've been, chomping at the bit to start pursuing, but I never could because I didn't want to pull away any time or dedication from my physical performance to, start a business or whatever it is. And so, once I did what I wanted to do in the space, I had enough gold medals, and I was like, all right, like time to move on, time to move on to something else and be a better member of my family, but be a better friend to the people around me. So
this is something that I'm fascinated by. I made a video called The Toxic Winner Mindset. And I know that toxic is a word that seems polarizing in a way, but it's also kind of fitting because what you're doing to your brain, it's like this trickery.
I mean, you're programming your brain to do one thing and one thing only, and that's just win.
Which isn't natural, right?
You need to have this fearless mentality, and like I talked about a lot of, I was scared all the time. Like anyone that's saying that they're not scared, it's either you're not challenging yourself or you're lying. I was like, being scared or crying or letting your emotions get the better, who cares? It's what are you doing with that emotion? I had those emotions, but I did the best I could to never let my emotions dictate my actions. And, it can be tough at times of like, you're scared shitless, like you're performing in front of 10, 20,000 people live, never mind how many people are watching online. And you're like, you're incredibly vulnerable. You're opening yourself up for, people that they see you for 5 minutes a year on TV, and then they think they have your life figured out. And so they're making sure that their opinions and stuff. And it can wear on you if you allow it to, but.
So I have this, for kind of like the general pop, and it's something that I've followed with weightlifting, and it's this thing, it's like low expectations, high standards. And even just saying low expectations, it sounds like a cop-out.
Yeah.
But really what I mean by that is like, you're not expecting anything because nothing is given.
Nothing's owed to you, nothing's given to you, yeah.
However, I feel as though in your situation, being, and I coined this as like the hyper winner, not just someone who's elite, but someone who wins, right? The Jordans, Brady's, whatever. They do expect a lot of themselves, and they do have high standards. It's like, so that's the part that's toxic. It's the high expectations. So you put that extraneous pressure on you that I would say for a newbie, for someone or general population, do not put any expectations in you. But that's where I love thinking about the difference. You had those expectations on yourself, and ultimately that's what caused a lot of that pressure and pain, right?
I think it was because I realized the opportunity that I had. I knew that this is, I found CrossFit relatively late in life for most people. To start a professional sports career at 24 is probably not the most common thing. But yeah, I just realized the opportunity that I had and what I could provide for the people around me. And I was like, so the best example is probably when like Sammy worked at Reebok. She had a big role there, and it was a career, not just like a job that she happened to land in. And I was like, I want you to quit your job and move to Vermont. And when she did that, I remember after one competition or something, I went up to her and I was like, just give me 5 years. If you're willing to help and support me for 5 years, I'll set us up for life. And so she did, like she quit her job. She moved into my parents' basement with me, and we sacrificed a lot. Like we lived in an apartment for years that didn't have windows. It was like a damp, dingy, half-finished apartment in the basement with no windows. And Sammy's coming from like this career job that she could stay in for 20 years and no one would ever question it. She had a beautiful place, she had all her friends and family around, and she was willing to drop everything, move to Vermont to be with me and support me. And so that sacrifice isn't lost on me. And it was like, okay, I'm not just out here. It's not just selfish for me. It's selfish for, the people around me. And I knew the opportunity I had, and I was like, I know I can change our lives.
Yeah, let's talk about Sammy a little bit, because I do think that that anxiety provided you with a competitive advantage, at least from my perspective and when watching you speak so much. But I also think Sammy, you talk about her all the time. I think she provided you with a competitive advantage, wouldn't you think?
In every aspect. That poor girl, like the week before a competition, I'm just a ball of nerves. I'm envisioning everything going wrong. I'm envisioning everyone else having the best day of their lives out on the competition floor. And, I'm imagining my nightmare coming true, because it's happened before. I've fallen off a 20-foot rope in front of thousands of people when I was 100 and some odd points ahead. And then, the guy in second place, Ben Smith, won the workout. I got dead last, so there's a 100-point swing in the leaderboard. I've experienced it. That's been a reality to me. And so I'm always anticipating that happening again.
And Sammy's got to deal with that.
And so Sammy, early on, early into dating, I would ask her like, hey, if this competition doesn't go the way we hope it will, like, are you still going to love me? And she's, you know, and it's just insecurities coming out. She's like, yeah, of course, I don't give a shit what you do out there. Like, I love you. And then it became routine, like, you know, month out, week out, you know, she's reassuring me. And I felt like that was a weapon for me going out on the floor, was knowing that, like, none of the love in my life is conditional, and I can go and balk the entire competition, and I'm coming home to the same hug. I'm coming home to the same love, and so I was like, I'm not out here to impress anyone. I'm out here to provide, and
that's amazing, man.
Yeah, that was a weapon, because I would always hear all the competitors talking about, you know, I'm out here and I see my partner in the crowd or my coach, and I want to make them proud and all this. I'm like, you got to be out here for yourself. Like you're out on that floor by yourself. You got to want it personally. And so I felt like I had a good combination of, I realized the opportunity that I had and what I could provide for, you know, friends and family around me. But at the same time, I know that all the people in my life, they don't give a shit about what I do. You know, my best friend, like I think the last time he showed up to the games was in 2015. And then after that, and then he couldn't make it in 2016. So I went from second place to first place, and then he was like, oh, I'm not allowed to show up anymore, you know? And you know, it's just good having people like that in your life that they don't care what you do.
What sort of things did Sammy like? Because I know a lot of it, you know, the sport of CrossFit, what I love about it is, like, it's so hyper focused on fitness, because that's what it's about. Mm-hmm. So what you get is this direct correlation of importance on recovery and nutrition. Mm-hmm. Like, it's tough to say to a certain extent, like, how much exactly this is going to affect, like, say, a football game, you know, with 11 other or 10 other players other than yourself, how much your nutrition and recovery is going to affect it. Like, obviously in the long run, you want to have good nutrition and recovery. Yeah. But in CrossFit, it's like 1-to-1. It's like, so having Sammy, I know she did a lot of food for you, a lot of stuff like that. Tell us about that. Like, cause that to me is super interesting. That's a massive competitive advantage.
I mean, she did everything, you know, like our home life was taken care of because of her. Like, I was in a situation where Sammy handled everything in our personal lives. O'Keefe handled everything in our professional lives. And so I literally woke up and I just had to train. That was the only thing on my mind, was training and competing. That was it.
That almost puts more pressure on you to do your job, right?
Yeah, there's no excuses.
I kind of got the chills a little bit thinking about that, because right as you were saying that, it's like, well, if I can take all these pressures and put them in all these different places, it relieves a lot. But now it's like all you have is 2 pointed things to do: sleep and eat. Well, 3: sleep, eat, train, and then compete. And that's crazy. I imagine training was probably stressful, because you had the ghosts of other people.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, you know, like my, you know, and it's, I didn't realize as much the impact that, like, my training had on Sammy, you know, until I retired, and then, like, we're supposed to start our lives together, and then, you know, I end up coaching some athletes, and now I'm working more than I was before. And, you know, Sammy is very open. She's like, your competition career was very lonely for me, because you'd be at the gym 8 hours a day and I'm home alone. And so, you know, when I was training in Vermont in the summers, Sammy's training 3 a days, because she said, she was like, no, like, you have a job to do. And I know if I want to spend time with you, I have to go to the gym. And so if I want to spend time with you, I have to be in the gym. And if I'm in the gym, I might as well train. And so she would just do modified workouts that I was doing, but she'd be in the gym 2-3 times a day, 6 days a week. And so, you know, she was definitely counting down the days, but she sacrificed a lot.
I want to throw the weightlifters watching or listening a bone here, because that's, you know, as you know, that's primarily what my channel's been about. I've been following you for a long time because even when I was doing CrossFit, I had a massive weightlifting bias. So I've been a fan of the purest weightlifters. Yeah. And you're probably set the precedent as far as purest weightlifting goes.
Yeah, I remember once I made the transition, and then I had a little bit of success. You know, I definitely saw some of my friends from weightlifting try to make the transition as well. Mm-hmm. And
yeah. So I want to, like, you said, and I kind of want to break this down. You said, I got into a professional sport late.
Yeah.
But you didn't really, because you had however many years of weightlifting training, right? I mean, it'd be one thing if you went from basketball or baseball to CrossFit.
When I came into CrossFit, I hit the ground running.
Yeah. And you had a base already, right?
Yes. So like when I started CrossFit, I had a 300-pound snatch and a 365 clean and jerk. So 137 kilo snatch, 165 kilo clean and jerk.
Mm-hmm. So back squatted over 5, right?
So I've never back squatted 500. 497. And one of our coaches, Jake, he just did he was like, I'm just doing a strength cycle. Like I just need to get better at weightlifting. So, you know, kind of maintained his fitness, but put it on the back burner and just focused on weightlifting. And he squatted 500 a couple weeks ago. And as soon as he did it, I was like, all right, let's get it going. I got it.
Are you working towards it?
So I've squatted 5 times in the last 3 weeks. And like, I didn't go below parallel for a long time. Because I'm like, dude, I've competed in some form of weightlifting for almost 20 years. I'm like, I just want to chill for a minute. I just need a bit of a break. And within five squat workouts, I got up to 485.
Okay.
And I was like,
it's going to happen.
I'm like, I didn't go below parallel for 2 years. And within 5 workouts, I was 12 pounds from my max. So yeah, I just wanted to find like a rough max, just so I could start.
So you had this base going into CrossFit, but it's not just any base. It's not just an athletic base. It's like one of the bases. I mean, the other one that would compete with it would be gymnastics. But in a certain level, you get, like as far as a base going into CrossFit,
yeah,
right?
I would say even like being a proficient Olympic weightlifter translates to gymnastics, but not the other way around.
But I mean, it translates to so like I was saying, if you were going to take, so like a gymnast going into CrossFit, great. Weightlifter going into CrossFit, great. Not many other things.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe an endurance athlete, maybe. But like you had that advantage going into it. And I kind of want to, I guess I would like to talk about your career in weightlifting a little bit. But I want to know like how that felt. Like
my career in weightlifting was just a squandered opportunity. I just didn't have the knowledge that I needed. You know, I got the experience once it was, or I got the knowledge once it was too late. So like I had a fine weightlifting career. You know, won junior nationals, was on the junior world team. I had to miss my last year as a junior because of my back injury, but I just didn't know what I didn't know. So I held my body weight down for like 5 years too long. And I didn't know how to strength train properly. You know, I was young, and so it's like I wanted to get better at the things I was good at and try to just like pretend like my weaknesses weren't there. For weightlifting, 5'6" as a 77 kilo lifter, a little bit too tall, a little bit too thin. Like my waist was tiny. And so I just didn't have the raw strength that was needed. My technique, flexibility, coordination were phenomenal, but my strength was pathetic. Mm-hmm. Like I remember the first time I clean and jerked 375, my deadlift was 400.
Wow.
Like,
yeah.
And so like, so when I, years later, once I'm looking back at like, oh yeah, I broke my L5 in 2 spots. It's like, yeah, no you did. Like you're operating at like just like 100% efficiency. As soon as that bar is just a tiniest bit out of place, I don't have any wiggle room. So, you know, in my last year, I bumped up to the 85s. actually when I left the 77s, I went home on Christmas break from college, and my coach at the time, he was like, hey, by the time you get back, I want you to fill out the 85s. I came back as a full 94. Like, I overshot the 85s, and I got so big.
It's just that's such a common thing in strength sports, is everyone has that mistake. And like my whole life, I was told you can eat whatever you want. You can just gain weight. Like, you can never train enough, like, or you can never eat enough. Sorry.
Yeah.
You'll always be able to out-train your diet. And like it's just growing up being in football and being a tall, lanky weightlifter. But the reality is you could put on shitty weight. And I'm sure in that period of time you put on bad weight, right?
Oh, yeah. It was like a game for me. I wanted to see in 14 days how much weight can I gain. And it was a full-time job. Like, so there are 3 things that I did that I don't recommend to anyone. I felt absolutely terrible. It had to have taken a year off my life. I don't even know if they still make them, but Costco muffins. Remember those like giant muffins, and they were like 1,100 calories a piece. I was buying those by the tray, just cut them in half, put like a big old slab of butter on it, put it in the microwave, and I was just eating those all day. And then every night before bed, whole milk and a jar of peanut butter.
An entire jar of peanut butter.
Like the regular size, not like the big bucket of Jiffy, but regular size jar of peanut butter. And like the first night, it was cool. You're like, oh, this is delicious. This is fun. And then you wake up the next morning and you're like, I have peanut butter in my veins. And I did that every day for a little bit over 2 weeks. And granted, like my starting weight was from when I weighed in at a competition. So I had to cut down a couple pounds, but you have to weigh in an hour before you lift. So you can't cut too much. But in that 14-day stretch, I put on 33 pounds. And like, I remember going back to NMU, walking through the dorms, and like I had an afro at the time and scraggly beard. And the last time all my friends saw me, I was 169 pounds. The next time they saw me, I'm over 200. So I'm walking down the hall, and I remember people, like, it's after Christmas break, so there's a lot of new athletes that come in for the new semester. And like my friends would be like, oh, hey, welcome to the dorms. Holy shit, what happened? And I'd be like, I gained weight. It was disgusting.
That's like such a typical, like I know so many weightlifters who have done this same thing.
Yeah.
And then they grow up a little bit, they figure out, hey, that was dumb.
Oh yeah.
But I also, you wouldn't be where you are if you never did that. You lifted, maybe you had a squandered opportunity, maybe you weren't dialed as an 18-year-old, but I'll tell you what, if everything was dialed as an 18-year-old, you could be an engineer right now and you would have never been a CrossFitter.
So I, like, my goal in weightlifting was to go to the Olympics. Like, and if, what year is it? I think it was 2016. Chicago was one of the final bids in the running.
Right.
I think it was.
Yep.
And then
it went to Rio.
Yeah. So if anyone listening that doesn't know, like, if your home country hosts the Olympics, you get to send a full team. But if it's another country hosting, you have to qualify off points. In the United States,
we only had 3 that year.
What was it? 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Chad Vaughn, Kendrick Ferris.
In 2016?
Oh, there's 2, and then Casey Berger was the alternate, right?
Yeah, no, that was 2012. I'm talking 2016, we only had 3. And Maddie didn't make it. Maddie Rogers.
Yeah.
But anyways, go on.
It was once Chicago didn't get the bid, I realized, like, all right, my odds of being the top weightlifter are, finding a needle in a haystack. But I was like, top 8 to get on the full team. I was like, I think that's a realistic expectation. So, when Chicago didn't get the bid and now it's like setting in like, oh, I'm not going to the Olympics ever.
And it's a whole quad then, right?
And then it's, it's like, holy my dream just got ripped away. And it's very easy to see, you don't have a lot of life experience at that point. So it's like, you're only looking at the negative. If I had gone to the Olympics, there's no chance I would have pursued CrossFit. There's no chance I would have ever done that.
But the thing is, you wouldn't have known. I mean, God, we could go down and do the butterfly effect of where your life would be,
And then I started CrossFit. I was still at school at UVM. I got a degree in engineering, a degree in business. And people are like, oh, you're so lucky that you're so fortunate that you found CrossFit and that it provided this opportunity. And at the same time, like, don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for it. I wouldn't change anything. But at the same time, I'm like, well, how do I know that CrossFit wasn't, the path that was, not as good? Like, if I went as an engineer, who's to know? Like, maybe I would have worked at a startup that went to $10 billion.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, my life now is the shitty option between the two. So it's like, who knows?
Of course.
I love my life now. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I don't want anything to change. It's like, I'm content. I'm happy.
But it's cool that you can look back on your Olympic weightlifting career and be like, yeah, I squandered some shit. I didn't do things right the right way. I think about that all the time.
It's hindsight's 2020.
Of course.
And as soon as and at 18,
but think about the advantage that it gave you that you sucked as an 18-year-old.
Yep. Oh yeah.
It's possible that you could have had everything dialed at 18 and you just keep it going and just like crush CrossFit. But you gave yourself that advantage of being like, now I have a fresh start in a new sport. Holy shit. I can change my life here.
But then also I think about handling the responsibility and the opportunities that you have, like that were given to me as, as a high level CrossFitter, one of the best in the world, and realizing like, if I was given this when I was 18, well, I would have fucked that up too. Like the first check you get, you're like, yo, I'm getting a Ferrari, let's go. Yeah. So thankfully I found it a little bit later in life. I had a few more life lessons and, a better head on my shoulders, better people around me. So, I was able to capitalize on it fully.
Your teenage story is an interesting one, that you had the awareness at 17 to say, I'm done drinking. And
yeah, it wasn't really much the awareness, it was more, getting punched in the head a few too many times. And, and I had amazing examples around me of I saw the examples of what's going to happen if I keep going down this path.
Of what?
Of just being a shithead.
Yeah.
Just like being selfish, just petty crimes and just being a shithead. Mm-hmm. Like I don't want to incriminate myself.
No, yeah.
But I was not a nice kid. I was not a good kid. And so I saw the path that some of my friends went down, where the worst got worse, and I lost some friends, and then I also had some examples of friends that were worse off than me, cleaned up their act, and now they're these like glowing examples that I use all the time of like, hey, like this friend here was a heroin addict for 10 years, and now look at them, they turn their life around. It's not easy in the moment, but like you will make it. And so I just saw those examples put out in front of me, and alcoholism runs in my family. It's immediate family, extended family, and so I the writing was on the wall. I knew where it was going to lead. I had an opportunity. I already had the offer to move out to Colorado Springs to train at the Olympic Training Center, and I was like, putting myself in that coach's shoe, I'm like, if he hears about me getting arrested back in Vermont, like, why would he stick his neck out for me? Like, no, he's not going to take on this liability. And so I was like, all right, I'm not willing to throw this opportunity away. So it was just like, just cut it out cold turkey and, change people, places, and things and try to make the best of it.
I find it very admirable that you, even though, like, the first thing I thought was like, it's really to have the know-how to make these decisions at 17 years old, and you're like, no, it's just it was a nothing decision. But I really do think like there is a distinct special gift to be able to do that, and I want to commend you on that, because like, dude, there are 17-year-olds that you could keep hitting them in the face and they won't adjust. They won't change, and you at some point made that stance. And so I think no matter where your life went, you would have been successful in your mind in whatever metric.
Yeah, kind of like The quick story, like I knew I didn't party like other kids. Other kids my age, like I saw the difference between,
How so?
like just like how they drank or like what they did at parties and whatever it was. And, for me, it was like, no, I'm getting blackout drunk as quickly as possible.
It was a sport and you want to be the best at it.
Moderation's for cowards. If 1's good, 2 is better, and 10 is awesome. And like when I don't need to go into my drunk log, but
no, it's
so like
my
dad, when I was super young, like 12, 13 years old, he was always encouraging me to go hang out with this guy and this group of friends that he had. But they were like, so my friend Nate, that my dad was always encouraging me to hang out with, was like 25. He had his own house, had his own car, like, and I always thought it was cool that I'm hanging out with a 25-year-old, but at the same time, I'm like, why the is my dad encouraging me to hang out with this 25-year-old? A couple years later, I'm like, oh, it's because he was sober. And so my dad was like, if you're hanging out with Nate, you're safe. You're not out drinking or drugging or anything like that. And so Nate would pick me up every weekend. We'd go dirt biking, quadding, whatever it was. And then 6 p.m. they would all go, he and all his friends would go to a meeting, and they would just drop me off at home before they went to the meeting. And then one day, this is probably later on, like I'm 15, 16 years old. We go out quadding for the day, and then it ran a little bit late, and Nate was the speaker for a meeting. So he gets up, tells his whole story, what happened, or what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And they were just running behind. So Nate, he's like, dude, I'm sorry, I don't have time to go swing by your house to drop you off. I'm the speaker tonight, so I can't be late. Do you mind just coming and sitting in the back? I was like, yeah, of course. I've been to a meeting before, and I was like, yeah, I'll just sit in the back, stay quiet. And I'm listening to his story. And I quit drinking at 17, so I couldn't have been older than 16. And he's telling his story, and I'm just in the back crying, because I was like, I thought like, did my dad put him up to this to like tell my story? And I'm like, oh no, that's just my ego. Like, no one gives a fuck about me. But it was like, I just saw so many parallels between his story and my story. And so I was like, the writing's on the wall. These habits are going nowhere good. And so, of course, I didn't quit right then. I stayed active for another couple months and let get a little more chaotic and worse. But so the day I decided that I wanted to quit and make a life change, the changing people, places, and things wasn't hard for me. I already had this whole network of friends that were clean and sober and doing good things with their lives. And so it started just like, we still go out quadding, but instead of them dropping me off, I would just go to the meeting with them. So the transition for me, one big thing was I'm 16 or I'm 17. I'm a very shallow bottom drunk. Like, I didn't have a house to lose. I didn't have kids to lose. I didn't have a relationship to, like, I'm just a kid at home. I'm in high school. So I didn't have much to lose. And then the transition, I already knew.
Yeah.
I already knew this whole network of people. So the transition for me was very simple compared to a lot of others. So I'm just very thankful that, my dad put me in that situation and that I had this network of friends that I could just, oh, boom, all right, now I'm down a better path.
Do you feel as if you had some sort of addictive personality?
Oh, my life is an addictive personality. I don't do anything in moderation, and so once I realized that it's not just alcoholism, it's just an ism, and I watched family members go through it of like, the only reason there's meetings for drinking and drugging is because the side effects of it are terrible. And nobody's like, so when I went to college, I was like, well, if 1 degree is good, 2 is better. So I did a double major, double minor. Like, I had engineering, business, a minor in math. And I don't even remember what the other minor was in, but nobody's complaining to me of like, hey man, you're studying too much. You're doing too much school.
But they would be complaining if it was, hey man, you're boozing too much.
Exactly. The side effects of this positive habit are fantastic. Nobody's coming up to me and like, hey man, you're doing too well in CrossFit. You need to dial it back.
But do you ever think though that, sorry to interrupt, but do you ever think though that like people could have done that? You're training too hard?
Yeah, I mean,
there's negative. I mean,
so like my first example of it was school, and then obviously too much of anything isn't good.
The dose makes the poison.
But I just realized, this personality, this trait of like, I don't want to do anything in moderation. As soon as I put my mind to something, it's like I just obsess over it. I realized like it doesn't have to be a curse. When I first quit drinking and it's like all I want to do is drink, well, that sucks. But it's like if I obsess over getting straight A's in school, well, this is a gift. I enjoy sitting here and studying for 10 hours. When I want to get better at rowing and I'm rowing 5,000 meters, 10,000 meters every single day, well, the consequences of those habits are fantastic. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, all right, I just need to apply this addictive personality to something that has a better outcome than getting blackout drunk.
Did you do that with a lot of different movements that you, and I hate to say it, but sucked at, right? Like, there's no question. I've heard you say you sucked at running.
Yep.
You probably sucked at rowing at one point. You sucked at everything at one point in CrossFit. But did you do that? You were like, I can obsess over this, and
The first movement in CrossFit that I like obsessed over was kettlebell swings.
Interesting.
For whatever reason, I think it was probably one of the first movements in a workout that came up, and I saw how good everyone else around me was and how terrible I was. I'm like, this is such a simple movement, and so I just did kettlebell swings every single day until, and this was my marker early on, until the class workout had that movement and I was excited to see it. So the first time I go in and I look at the screen and it's like 50 kettlebell swings in the workout, and I was like, oh yeah, kettlebell swings.
Now you know.
And I was like, got it. Like,
wow.
It's how often do you love something that you're terrible at? Not often.
Yeah.
And so for me, I used that as an indicator early on of, as soon as I saw, I was excited that it was in the workout. I was like, all right, good. That probably means that I've gotten a lot better at it, that I'm proficient at it now. Time to move on to the next thing.
I never thought about placing that rule, but it's just always how it's worked with me.
Yeah.
And especially in CrossFit, because it's like, you walk in and you see the class and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to get today. It's a roll of the dice. But there's always that workout where you're like, oh yeah, for sure. This one, for me, obviously I'm a long dude. Yeah. I see rowing and wall balls.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm ready to go. But there was a point where I didn't understand wall balls.
Yeah.
But now I get them and it's like, okay, I'm done with those.
Yep.
What about running? Because I know you had the funniest story is, man, getting your ass kicked by high schoolers and running.
Oh, sprinting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
my
first CrossFit workout, I think it was overhead squats. I think it was overhead squats with 95 pounds and like a 400-meter run for a couple rounds or something.
That's a Cindy or something?
It is a girl workout.
Nancy?
Yeah, that might be it.
Whatever, yeah.
I don't know any of the names. I only know a few of the names. But I was the first one done with the overhead squats. They were effortless. I'm like 95 pounds. Just let me get my shoulders in the right spot and I'm just air squatting quickly. Yeah. But then I remember getting passed by this gentleman that was a member at the gym, Damon. And, probably, early 50s, but gray hair, heavier guy. And he just hoofed it past me on the run. And I was like, holy shit, I'm bad at running. And at the time, it wasn't just that I was bad at running. It was my conditioning was terrible. And so once again, I was like, all right, how do I get better at conditioning? And it's like, all right, let's pull out a rower and start rowing. And thankfully, I had great people in the gym around me. So Concept 2 is based out of Vermont. So a lot of their employees went to Champlain Valley CrossFit. And I remember Greg Hammond, he walks in the back room one day and he sees me rowing and he was just like, stop. What are you doing? That is terrible. And so I never had the opportunity to develop too many bad habits because I had phenomenal coaching around me. Champlain Valley CrossFit had phenomenal programming.
You're as far as the habits go, though, I don't think that ever would have happened to you because you mastered two of them. I mean, not mastered, yeah. But you mastered the things in CrossFit that if people start CrossFit, they're like, wow, I can't tell you how many people are like, my weightlifting sucks.
Yeah.
So you had that in the can. And no matter how you're going to be at rowing, it's not going to be as bad as somebody who's at snatching.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Right? So yeah, sorry. He came fixed. Like, you never developed those bad habits, but
yeah. So like even with rowing, you know, like, I mean, like we're down here watching the elite division. You see people rowing, you're like, what are you doing? Like, at this point in this sport, it's like the resources are there. If you're still bad, if you still have bad technique,
that's ego.
That's on you.
Yeah.
Like, the resources are there. But you know, 10 years ago, they weren't. So just by pure coincidence, I happened to go to a gym where like 3 or 4 of the Concept 2 employees attended.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
So immediately, like within the first week of me working on my rowing, I had Greg come up to me and it's like, all right, here, let me show you the proper order of operation. And then, you know, Jay Jenny, the owner of Champlain Valley, like, he was a huge help to me early on of, you know, he's the one who signed me up for my first competition. He was the first guy to ever program for me. He, like, showing me the strings, and his wife was a competitor. So, you know, I had someone showing me the way very early on. Yeah, so I'll always be thankful for that stuff.
Do you feel like at every stage there was a new thing? Like you were you know, at one point you're like, wow, I suck at kettlebell swings. Now I love them. Rowing, I sucked at that. Now I love it. Do you feel like it just never stopped? Like, you never felt like you were on solid ground? Like, because CrossFit, it's just like so many different things.
You always have a worst movement. It doesn't matter how good you get. You always have one that is the worst. So it doesn't matter if, you know, you're snatching 100 pounds or 300 pounds. Like, that might be your weakness. Yeah, so always I was working on a weakness. And then if I would finish a competition and then, like, I'm like, man, I don't really know. There's not like one glaring pit in my game. There's not a glaring hole in my game. I would just pick something random. And it'd be like, all right, parallel handstand push-ups. I'm okay at them. I'm like on par with everyone else. But I don't have my eyes on anything else right now. So I'm just going to become the best at that.
What was something among the elite where you're like, yo, this is some low-hanging fruit that none of you guys are picking, and I'm just gonna fucking pick this shit all day? Was there something like that? Was there ever a thing like where you're like, man, no one, like, I don't understand why no one is doing this, and it's just like giving me so much? Were there moments like that? Because I mean, you kind of a reference to it just now. It's like, wow, there's people here in the elite division who don't even row correctly, like, and it's such an easy movement to just like put your ego aside and get better at it.
Yeah.
Do you feel as though there were things, it could be from nutrition, sleep, whatever, that like, why is no one else doing this? They might be doing it now, but when you were competing, at least.
It's kind of tough to say because I didn't train with many competitors, you know? So like, you know, like,
yeah, it's hard then to, yeah.
Sammy for a long time was like my #1 training partner. Like she would be doing 2-3 days with me, and like she fitnesses for fun, but she just wants to spend time with me. But yeah, I don't really know.
I have an example actually.
Yeah.
Brent Fikowski, I'm really good friends with him. I think you know him well. You're good friends with him. He was telling me, he's like, dude, like, I'll show up to the games and some athletes are like, man, I'm pretty hungry. I guess I'm just going to go to like the vendor village and go get some food. And he's like, what?
Yeah.
We're pro athletes, bro. He's like, I've had my food prepared for weeks. I knew exactly when I was going to eat, what I was going to eat. Like, I knew where it is. Like, I'll scope out where it is. Yeah. Were there things like that you were
100%.
seeing, you know?
And, yeah, and like through most of my career, you know, I'm hyper focused on these tiny details. And for every 100 of those tiny little details, probably 99 of them didn't matter. But I looked at it as like, you know, there were some of like, you see athletes making this like huge life change a month before the games. And you're like, you're doing what? Like, why would you move across the country a month before the games? Like, that's a week of training. And not only like a week of not training, you're sitting in a moving van for 3 days, you know? So stuff like that, where it's like month before the games, I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm either at my house or I'm at the gym. I'm not going anywhere else. I'm not doing anything else. So like, I'm sleeping in my bed. So stuff like that. But you also have to remember that all these different athletes have different priorities too, where it's like, I'm looking at it of like, I see somebody else's actions and I can't wrap my head around them because they don't match up with my values. But that doesn't mean that
it doesn't work for them.
That might be dedication to that person.
You know,
that might be their level of commitment to it, and they're happy with it.
Yeah. And
it's like, so who am I to say like, oh, you're doing it wrong? No, you're just doing it different.
And I feel like Brent, at the same time, like as morally or as superior as it sounded when he said that, I think he also was like, but to that person who's going to go to the vendor village, who's to say that that's relieving of stress and that's how they operate, you know, like.
So, you know, like there's guys like myself, or used to be myself, Brent, Pat, Noah, like our lives are competing. That's how we make a living. That's what we do. So, you know, most games athletes most games athletes now are probably full-time, but you know, 5 years ago, there's only a handful of guys that could afford to do it full time.
And that's okay. So I want to get into this because you were at a point in CrossFit where it's like, all right, are we doing this? Is this a real sport now? Because if it's a real sport, I'm going to win it. And I'm going to make it a real sport, you know, because it was like this fringe thing.
Yeah.
And it still was kind of a fringe, but I think when you were winning it, man, it was like, okay, this is the sport. You're telling me this is what we're doing. Okay, I'm going to do it now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I always waited until the rule book was printed, until this like stuff was in writing. Like, this is fact. This is the season. This is, you know, if you do this, you get this. And I would put an attack plan together. Yeah, you know what? I think it got legitimate a little bit before I came in. But then I saw the sport just flourish, you know, especially coming up like through 2018. Like, those were some wild times.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, I just saw the opportunity I had at hand, and I was like, all right, let's go. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right, and I'm going to dedicate everything to it.
Now, this is an important question because I was thinking about this a lot last night, and it doesn't have to just be training or competing. What was the hardest thing you've ever done? Hardest moment of your life where you didn't know if you're going to make it out?
How it relates to CrossFit? Or
life.
In life.
I mean, because look, like if we're looking at difficult things.
Listen, nothing in CrossFit's difficult, all right? Like people, like it's stressful, it's this and that. As soon as you think you're going to lose a family member or something, it puts it in perspective. And you're like, this isn't stressful. In the grand scheme of things, this doesn't matter. You know, like it's like there's real hardship out there. There's people dealing with health issues, cancer, losing loved ones, you know, sleeping on the street, whatever it is. Like your problems are proportional to your life. When I'm competing, I'm healthy, everything's good, you know, friends and family around me, everyone's happy, healthy, doing well, a hangnail would be the worst thing in my day. And I would obsess over it. You know, if I got a cut in my thumb and I'm like, dude, I can't hook grip for 2 weeks because I have this cut on my thumb. Like, how am I going to cope? As soon as I find out my dad's going in for a triple bypass, nothing matters. You know, it's like you're hyper focused on that. And so there's been stuff outside the gym. You know, like my dad's had a heart attack, 2 triple bypasses, 5 stents put in. Like, that's the shit that's hard when you don't know if you're going to see them again, you know? So, you know, my dad's first triple bypass was an emergency, and so 0 warning in it. And I was in high school, and didn't even get to see him before he went in. You know, it was, he went in for his 50-year-old stress test. I get a call from my mom. She was like, hey, I have some bad news. Your dad's going in for a triple bypass. And you're fucking 16 years old, 17 years old. And you don't know how to cope with that. And then, 10 years later, he goes in for another stress test and finds out then that the first triple bypass didn't take, so he gets rushed in for another one. And, he's up at camp, and I forget what it was, but I was supposed to be up at camp with him to help him reshingle our cabin. Hot summer day, and he had a heart attack on top of the roof. And he was so fatigued that he said, he was like, all I wanted to do was get down to the boat launch and just lay in 6 inches of water. But he's like, I didn't have the energy, so I went into the cabin and tried to take a nap. And then after an hour not being able to sleep, calls his sister-in-law, who's a doctor in town, and was like, hey, Shar, I'm having a heart attack. And she was like, I'll send the ambulance. And he's like, no, don't worry, I don't want to be an inconvenience. He fucking drove himself to the doctor's office, But you get the call about stuff like that, and you're 300 miles away, and there's nothing you can do. Like, once you go through some stuff like that, or losing a loved one, I best friend take his own life. It's like once you deal with stuff like that, it's like, dude, if I lose this competition, who gives a f? It's like, I'm happy, I'm healthy, everyone around me has a smile on their face, they're all doing well, like life's good,
I think about a very part of my life where I felt like I didn't have much control, and I think about the years probably 17 to maybe like 25.
Yep.
And it's a very scary time, and I know based off what you said, it's a scary time for you as well. Do you have any
Yeah, so
do you feel for those people out there now? I just for me, it's so palpable. Like, I want to help 17 to 25-year-old men. Like, I want to so bad, because it's like, I remember that time, and I'm like, I'm so scared for you.
So there's probably a couple stories that immediately come to the top of my head. So, so when I quit drinking, I met a buddy that we were about the same age. So we're both in high school. So you quit drinking in high school, you immediately lose half your friends, So he and I, we would just hit meetings together, like a couple a day. We were attached to the hip, and we were each other's support. And then I moved to Colorado to go to the training center. He basically lost his meeting buddy. He relapsed. And your disease is out in the parking lot doing push-ups when you're in those meetings. Like, you're not starting over. You're picking up where you left off. So, he got into heroin, got in a lot of trouble. And when he was sitting in his prison cell, met with his lawyer, and his lawyer was like, dude, you're going away for life. He went back to his cell and hung himself. And, that was my best friend. We got sober together, and I found out he was in prison. So I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, can you track down, what prison is he at? And so I can write him letters, I can call him, all this stuff. And my dad calls me back, a couple hours later, and he's like, hey, sorry, Nate's gone.
This Nate?
Different Nate, but same group. So when you're 20 years old dealing with some shit like that, that's some heavy guilt, because I'm like, would he have relapsed if I were there, And who knows? I don't, but losing a friend that close, that young of an age, dealing with my dad's health issues through the years. I remember being, when I was 18 and broke my back, my life, my singular goal, the only thing I gave any fucks about was going to the Olympics. That was my only priority. And then once I find out that I have 2 breaks in my L5, I talked to, 5 different spinal surgeons, and 5 for 5, they said, dude, your sports career is over. You're going to be lucky if you ever jog again. I'm living in Colorado. My family lives in Vermont. I have no one around me. And it's not even like, it wasn't even a situation of like, you're going to get out of this, but it's going to be tough. It's like, I don't even know how to get out of it, but I don't even know if I can get out of it. And just those hopeless nights. And then, like, have you ever been out to the OTC in Colorado?
No, I haven't.
So like, the buildings where the full-time athletes live are sick. Like, two bath apartments for 2 athletes. They're attached to the cafe. They're awesome. The building I was living in was old Air Force barracks. And so it's a cement room. I think it was like 12 by 12 with 3 single beds and a sink. It's about as close to a prison cell as you can get without being in prison. And that's where I lived. And, you know, I think the closest guy in age was 6 years my senior. And at 18 to 24, that's a big age gap. So I was lonely, I was depressed, like, and then to find out that even that's getting stripped away from me. Like, I was not in a good place. Like, I didn't have anyone to turn to. I didn't have anyone that I could relate to what I was going through, nothing. And so because of those hopeless moments where it's a situation of I don't even know how to get out of this, but I don't know even if I had a plan, if I can get out of it. And so I make it a point to reach out to people that I know or that I suspect are going through a hard time. Because I know that's one thing, because I look back to how hopeless and low I was, like through my back injury. I had 5 different surgeons tell me, like, you will never run again. You're never going to jog again. Like, never mind weightlifting. Like, that's out of the question. How low I was there, and then 5 years later, how incredible I felt. Like, I had a bit of success in CrossFit. I now had this healthy relationship. You know, I'm progressing. And I'm like, after that, I felt invincible. Because I'm like, I know how low I was here, and I know how amazing my life is now. I'm like, dude, if I fucking overcame that, fucking throw whatever you want at me. Like, and so since then, I've had more of those low moments. And I remember one, it was just a business deal that went bad, but I saw my livelihood get stripped away. Mm-hmm. And once again, it was...
Did you feel like you were back? Like your brain, did you feel like you were back at those 7?
Oh, it was hopeless. Like,
but you felt that it was just like the same emotion.
Like when I say for probably 3 months straight, multiple times a day, I would uncontrollably cry because I was so hopeless. I was in such a low place. You know, I saw this life that I promised to Sammy that if you sacrifice everything, I'll provide this. And I just saw that getting stripped away. And so when I say, like, for months straight, I would call O'Keefe 3 times a day. Be like, hey, any update? No? Okay. 2 hours later, hey, any update? No. Like, bless his heart for putting up with me. And bless Sammy's heart for putting up with me, because I cried for months. And then, you know, 2 years after that. But anyway, in that moment, I remember, I'm like, this is one of the lowest moments of my life, but I wonder what the silver lining is going to be. I wonder what good is going to come from this situation. I don't know if it's going to be tomorrow, the next day, or maybe it's going to be fucking 10 years down the road. But I know there's going to be a silver lining from this situation, because I was able to relate it to my hopes and dreams of going to the Olympics got stripped away. Mm-hmm. And if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have done CrossFit.
Yeah, you got the silver lining there. So
exactly.
What's the
So I had those examples.
Yeah, you had the prior experience. That was your PED going into your shittiness now, right? Like,
yeah. So
you were able to mitigate the despair now.
But I remember in those moments of, like, realistically, you know, I have hundreds of people that I can call and tell them I'm going through a hard time, and they would help me. Like, I know that. I'm surrounded by incredible people. But when I'm in a shitty spot, that phone weighs 5,000 pounds. It is so hard to pick up the phone when you have to, not just when you want to, but when you need help, that phone, you never pick it up. Mm-hmm. And so I make it a point at this point in my life, if I know someone's going through a tough time, even if I'm not super close to them, you know, it's just shooting them a note, be like, hey man, I hope, like, I'm here for you. Like, I just want you to know you're loved, you know, like, or if there's anything I can do, or I'll just call them and be like, do you want to talk about it? Or just, even if I'm not close with them and it's like they're going through something, it's like, get in the car, we're going to the gym. I'm going to get your mind off this situation for 1 hour, and we're, so even if it's just for that 1 hour that, maybe they don't think about it quite as often while they're working out, or even if it's just like they feel a little bit better when they go home, fantastic, but I've experienced the not being there for a friend in need, and I was like, never doing that again. I want to be the person that I wish I had when I was going through those things. That even if it's not somebody that's close to you, shoot them a text. The worst thing they're going to do is just not answer.
Right.
And I've had that happen 1,000,001 times too. Yeah. But for that one person that that was what they needed, fantastic, great.
I love that it's the same feeling. The despair that you feel at 32 is the same despair that you feel at 18. You just have the decade of experience to now be like, there will be a silver lining here.
Yeah.
I will reap it. And I wish there was a way that you could imprint that into a fucking high school kid and be like, dude, this is nothing.
Dude, I've thought about this, and I've said this for years, I really want to do what my weightlifting coach did for me. He had a weightlifting gym at the middle school in Essex. He bought all the equipment himself. He had no school funding. He didn't charge a dime to anyone, but he was there every day after school and Saturday mornings until noon for 3 hours for free. And he just provided this world-class coaching, world-class equipment to anyone that wanted to show up. Now, at this point in my life, I don't have the time to dedicate for 3 hours every single day of the week. But I want to provide that space and for kids. So not only hey, if you're training for football, we're not going to bench press and curl every day. I'm going to teach you proper technique, how to train properly and train the right things properly. But also I want to provide that space, because when I was a teenager, you can't go ask your dad about certain things that's incriminating, or that barrier of entry of it's sometimes it's nice to have somebody that's almost a stranger to be like, dude, how the do I deal with this situation? I'd be like, oh, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll tell you a situation that was similar to me. I'll tell you what I did and what I would do differently next time. And it sounds creepy, but I'm the same way. I'm I want to find a way to help, I want to be the person that I wish I had when I was 16 to 25. Yeah. Of hey, everything's going to be okay. You're going to get through this. It's all consuming right now. But in a month's time, you're not even going to remember this.
Can we just talk about how fucking amazing coaches are?
How amazing coaches can be.
Right.
I have met some pieces of
Okay, well, so let's barring the pieces of it's such an amazing profession, and it's brought me some of the most amazing men I've ever come in contact with, and they changed and formed my life, and they've brought me some shitty men, but barring those, what an amazing thing. What an amazing, it's something that I'm fascinated with, especially weightlifting coaches, just anyone, coaches.
It's not a responsibility to be taken lightly.
Right.
Because
especially with teenagers.
With a teenager, you're in an authoritative role, but you're in an authoritative role when it comes to this one discipline, but then it bleeds into everything else.
Of course.
And so if you're an example for these young minds that are just sponges, something as simple, the language you use, how you eat, think about a parent that smokes. You can tell your kid not to smoke until you're blue in the face, but they follow your example. They don't follow your words. And so it's you have to be on high alert. You need to watch every P and Q to make sure you're a good example. And of course, I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And we all have our flaws. We all have our demons, but it's having that realization that, okay, when I'm in front of this person, they're paying attention to me. They're going to mimic, they're going to pick up on what's that audio on TikTok? Your kids are going to figure you out. And it's like, your athletes are going to figure you out after a while. So it's like, you better make sure that you are a good example. Because it's a big role. And hopefully, like, the relationship that I want with my athletes is that they're not just coming to me for a good workout. They're not just coming to me for good technique, but it's then like, hey, I'm dealing with this problem in life. How do I juggle it with everything else going on? Because I've for myself, I've been through some, I have some good life experience, and it's like, I hope I can be that resource. Like, I always thought, I'm like, I'm an open book. Come and ask me questions. I've been through some good times, some bad times, and like, I think I have a very good self-awareness of what I did, why I did it, how it turned out. And so I'm always like, dude, hit me with your problems, let me try to help.
Matt, I appreciate you so much for doing this, man, taking the time.
This is a good podcast.
Yeah.
It's just a good chat.
Yeah. What is your future look like with HWPO, and what do you want people to pay attention to? It doesn't have to be that. You could just say.
No, this year is going to be a big year for us. Our team is growing. The resources that we have are growing. We're finally in about 3 weeks. We'll no longer be working out of our living room. We got an office building. We're basically building an affiliate just for competitors. We want to be. I want to provide to athletes what I wish I had when I was competing, and that is a free space that you can come in and train on your own schedule and have every resource possible. So we take possession of that building in a couple weeks, and so I'm hoping. It was after the games. I had a games athlete that I've watched his career over the last 5-6 years. And it was after the games last year. He had a phenomenal season, and he reached out and he asked me to coach him. He wanted to move to Vermont and have me coach him, and I had to say no, because I was like,
because you couldn't provide.
I was like, I literally just don't have the space. Like, I don't have a gym big enough for how many people we have, and if I bring you in, it's going to take away from what I've promised to other people. And after that, I saw that missed opportunity that fucking broke my heart, and I went, fuck that. Like, we're going out and getting a building. And so we got a little bit over 11,000 square feet now. So
good.
Hopefully we won't be running out of room anytime soon, so we can bring in more athletes, provide a better training environment, better training space for anyone that wants to take part.
I got to come out there, man. I really do. Especially because Vermont, bro.
We're hoping to have the gym space fully functional by quarterfinals.
Cool.
So we'll see. We'll see. Knock on wood. It's all on track so far. So hopefully, but as soon as that space is open. On the other thing too, like HWPO started renting a house. So when people come into town, you don't need to get a hotel. You don't need to worry about finding a kitchen or anything like that. It's like, there's your training space. There's the keys to your house. You're good to go.
Oh,
so
wow.
We just want to make sure that we want to be the best at what we do and provide the best services and have the best people around us. So that's what we're doing.
All right, man. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Appreciate you.